Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Lockdown Dads. My name's Ian Dinwiddie. I'm the founder of Inspiring Dads, a coaching business that helps stressed dads balance work and fatherhood. I have a couple of children. I have an 11-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son.
And I'm James Miller, author of Dads Don't Babysit and also father of two different children. And I'm delighted to say we're joined this week. I think this might be our final ever guest on Lockdown Dads in its current iteration. But it's the one we wanted to get from the very beginning. And that's true, actually. It's Will McDonald, who is, he's Group Sustainability and Public Policy Director at Aviva. He's Chair of Trustees at the Fatherhood Institute, both of which are very interesting. But perhaps most interesting of all, he is the Job Share Dads. Anybody who's worked in the dad's sphere as we have will have mentioned Will at some point and his job share partner Aviva, because they are a bit different, in fact probably unique in the UK business world, which is pretty special. So thanks for joining us, Will.
Thank you for having me. It's excellent to be here.
And we'll start with the question we ask all our guests over this entire run, and it was a really loaded question at the start, and it might actually be a loaded question at the end as well. How are you?
Thanks. How am I? I'm fine, I think. Fine in the way that we say fine, and we mean like okay. But we're actually moving house next week. So from a kind of coronavirus point of view, it's not really the thing you'd be choosing to do, relocating across the country. And that brings with it all its stresses, and that's a new school for the kids, and clearly, a lot of packing up and, discovering all these essential toys that the children have accumulated over the years that must never be got rid of, and have been lurking in the back of cupboards. But broadly, I'm fine.
It's a very stressful. What is it? What's the famous saying about moving house? It's like the second most stressful thing in your life after like being born or something like that, isn't it? I mean, it's a huge stress at the end of, I'm saying at the end of a stressful period. Who knows if we're at the end? I mean, I don't know. Well, let's just, we'll go around the how are yous, but we're speaking the day after the government has said that, Terminus Day is coming and it's going to be the 19th of July. I mean, I'll start with you on that one, Will. How do you feel about that? Because I say it's been a very up and down 19 months, and now there's a sort of end in sight. But is it really an end? As a person who has mental health, as we all do, and as a dad, is that on your mind, either for good or ill? That end of lockdown?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's going to be really interesting as to what we go back to and what we don't. So at the moment I live, sort of zone 3 in London. There's a lot of large roads around with some big lorries, and it's quite polluted if you look on the pollution maps. And I worry about our children's lungs. I worry about my lungs, but I worry about the children's lungs growing up and going to school near these massive roads. And there was a wonderful moment last year where, there was silence. Outdoors anyway. Indoors there was homeschooling and there was not silence. So there's, I think it'll be really interesting, in the world of work as a dad, how do dads go back, or what do dads go back to? Do they stay at home, and who has what choice about what? Because I think we should always remember there are many people like me whose job is to sit at a desk and talk and email and drive stuff forward, but there are lots of people who are much more hands-on, who've had a very different experience of coronavirus. I actually, speaking of mental health, I actually had a breakdown 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago this week, which I'm grateful for now. It was pretty horrific at the time, but I'm grateful for now because I now understand myself much better, and I kind of went through something. But as we went into lockdown, I was just coming back to work after 6-7 months off, and there is a place in my thoughts for people who have ongoing mental health trouble and then had to do lockdown, because I think that is, in many, many wonderful different ways and horrific different ways, could have been a very poor experience with not much support. Agencies that were overwhelmed and didn't know how to do it. So those people are always in my mind.
Yeah, and I think we need to keep those people in mind as we come out as well. I think there's also going to be a lot of trepidation about opening up, whatever that means. Especially if you've got used to lockdown. I mean, what that's going to mean. And I think it's, as you say, as parents, we're thinking about our kids, both mental health and how it's all going to work out. We'll maybe come on to that in a tick. Ian, how are you this week?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm looking forward to England versus Pakistan on Saturday. Although half the England team have got COVID, so it's going to look like a very different cricket experience, and there'll be a few names we haven't seen before. But I'm quite looking forward to that. I think it's interesting what you say, guys, about the kind of coming out of it. I think there's really positives about the language around how they're going to treat school kids and cases in schools, and I think that could be a real positive. We've been really lucky in our school, haven't had many cases, and my daughter came home for 2 weeks, but that's been it. But that sense of everyone in a bubble self-isolating for 2 weeks, regardless of how exposed they are or otherwise, I think correcting that, I think in time it's been seen as, I think we're probably getting to a stage where it's seen as it's better to have them in and ride out some of the challenges with it spreading amongst young people, because the rest of us hopefully are okay. I mean, I had my second jab yesterday, so I feel invincible, or I will do in 2 weeks' time. I can't remember how long I'm allowed to do that. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty positive, though I do have that slight anxiety about everything opening up and everything going back to normal. I'm obviously happily going to the cricket, which is 100% attendance. And also I've been to a few things recently where I think people have kind of abandoned the rules anyway to a certain extent. So it's kind of mixed feelings, I think, really. We're also going back to sort of moving house and that sort of side of things. So at what stage during the last year or so did you, as a family, decide that you needed to move somewhere different?
So we've actually been driven by my wife's got a new job. A job very much based in York.
Oh, wow.
So we're moving London to York. So we didn't really kind of make the decision to move. It was a logical consequence of getting the job, and I've been keen to move out of London for a while. I'm a Londoner, born and bred, and I've lived abroad a bit, and I've went to uni in Leeds, but actually I've never really lived as a grown-up, in another part of the UK. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to that.
It sounds like a massive opportunity. So in terms of, we obviously want to talk about your job share role and how that started. Do you want to sort of explain to us and explain to the audience how that came about? It's been about 4 years now that you've been doing a job share, and I think James was laughing and joking at the start of the recording about how actually you still may be the only sort of male job share in the UK that anyone sort of appears to know about. So talk us through what your path was, Will, to starting that role in that way.
Yeah, so I currently work at Aviva, and I've been there about 5 years, I think, when we'd had our first and our second child. We've got three, and I wanted to. I think, but probably scroll back one stage more. My wife and I had set out in our marriage to try and be, not equal parents, but at least I think equal has a very kind of measured, are you doing exactly 50% sort of thing. We didn't mean equal. What we meant is that, equal parents, and each of us would genuinely do our bit. And we quickly found ourselves that my wife was, at home a lot more, and I was in a full-time job. So I did a small rebalancing to move to 4 days a week. And that was great from having a day with the kids, but it's very unsatisfactory, kind of at work. You start on Monday, a day behind, and you never quite catch up with yourself until it's Friday, and then you're off and it starts all over again. But it was worth it, and I would do it again if that was the option. So I would said to my my boss, I would really like to consider a job share, and there were a couple of possibilities in there, and he said, well, leave it with me a couple of days. And then he came back and was like, do you know what? I'd love to job share. So he's now my job share partner of 4 years, and so he's called Sam, and he's excellent. He's been a brilliant work partner. It's kind of like a marriage at work. And I think we were. I think we put a lot of work into making it work at the beginning. And I'm very happy to talk about kind of the specific steps we went through to do that. But yeah, here we are 4 years later. We tend to say the most senior all-male job share in the country, but we are also by definition the most junior, because we are the only ones.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think it hasn't caught on in any degree at all, really?
I really don't know. I'm quite disappointed. Sam and I view it as part of our role to go out and talk about job sharing and point out that, at a reasonably senior level, running, some big budgets and team of 25 and dealing with senior stakeholders internally and externally and fast moving environments, this is all possible. And, we've done it. But I think there must be, some the response. Actually, so the response we normally get is, "It sounds great, but it wouldn't work in my role." So I think that's probably the kind of first hurdle. And then I guess if you lay that on top of, many more women than men work flexibly or part time, work non-standard hours, and I think coupled with those two, and a job share feels like quite a big step because you're putting yourself. There's a lot of trust in there. We always say you don't have to like, your job share partner, but you do have to trust them. Although, just to be clear, I do like Sam very much. But I think there's a sort of number of hurdles that people, really struggle to get over. And it probably feels quite a long way off from where they are currently.
Yeah, I mean, that's my experience. Just to round it up, if we're going to do how am I was feeling fine until my internet dropped out again.
Continuity be damned. How are you, James, apart from that?
Just hot spotting now. I was very happy I've been having my second jab, and then now I'm going to moan about BT OpenReach. Anyway, I mean, my experience of trying to get job share is exactly the same as Will's had to say. 6-8 months ago I applied for a job share, and got exactly that. I want more parents in journalism, but it wouldn't work for this role, and that's it. And it's no reason given beyond it wouldn't. I haven't got the imagination to envisage it, which I suppose begs the question, who or how did Aviva have the imagination to imagine it, to make it happen? Was there, how did it come about? Was there resistance?
No, it was
imagination.
Yeah, we bought the idea. Me and Sam bought the idea to Aviva, and we had an excellent boss. And I think this is something we should probably come back to, like the role of the line manager, because I think it's really important. But I think our boss said, okay, let's think about it. And Sam and I went away and we spoke to, I think probably like 16 people, 8 job share couples. And quite a lot were in the public sector because the public sector is kind of streets ahead in terms of job sharing. But we learned some really interesting things about like how you do it, some of the logistics, do you have a shared email? Do you have a shared calendar? Like when do you do your handover notes? And that, which was really important. But the other thing we got was that they all absolutely loved it. They were complete evangelists. And even people who weren't job sharing were basically desperate to get back to job sharing as soon as they could. So we parceled that up as a sort of survey, like a bunch of evidence. And then we wrote a kind of series of principles. So we've got like a side and a half of A4 with some, here's how me and Sam will approach the job share. So it's got some really straightforward rules. When in charge, take charge. Here's the decisions you can make without consulting the other. Here's the decisions you can't take without consulting the other. You can U-turn on a decision, but only the person who made the decision can U-turn. So you can't, in order to stop a team trying to game which line manager they go to, Which, to be honest, we've not had one single instance of this, but other people have reported. It's important to be really clear. So if you change your mind, which you might do as a person on your own in a job, but if you change your mind in a job share, it's important communications-wise for the person who made the decision to change their mind, not to be overturned by the other. So lots and lots of really useful, pragmatic points. And I think those two together, and we proposed a 6-month trial. So that basically was a package that said to our boss, A, we take this really seriously. B, we're not taking our foot off the gas. This is not a place to park ourselves. We're really ambitious, and we want to stay that way. We've got big stuff to deliver, and we're going to deliver it. But also, there's an escape clause. Anyone can stop it after 6 months. We'll all get around the table and review it, see how it went. And I think that amount of confidence that we were taking it seriously really helped my boss. And not everyone was in favour at senior levels across the company. But my boss said, right, we're doing it. That's it. 6 months trial. She's called Kirsty Cooper. She's brilliant. But at the end of the 6 months, we went round, the chairman, the then CEO, all these people, and they were all total converts. No one objected at all. So, 4 years later, here we are.
Power of role modeling, isn't it? The power of role modeling. We talked about that a lot. What's more important then, if you are thinking about job share, either, I suppose, as a man, as a dad, as anybody, because job share is obviously not just for parents. Is it more important to get that, if you like, that high level buy-in that people are open to the idea, or is it more important to have the low level details that you can put in front of someone and say, this is exactly how it's going to work?
I hope that there's more out there. If you're considering job sharing, there are more, podcasts and websites. There's whole new apps that are being, produced to try and match people up to job shares. So I think there's a lot more advice out there than there was sort of 4 years ago. We didn't have a job share contract, say, so we just carried on. It's as if we're kind of two part-time workers, legally, but we understand it as everyone understands it as a job share where we're only doing one function. But I think, to go back to your question, it's a bit chicken and egg. You'll never get off the ground if you don't have that high level buy-in. And even better, you might even get pride. You might get your boss going around telling everyone that, aren't they clever? They're the ones who, run part of their team as a job share. And that's really what you want to be aiming for. But you do really need the detail, because if you want it to work, you're doing a job, you need to absolutely deliver, you need to meet deadlines, you need to not let stuff slip between you. So you really need a shared understanding and a lot of trust. You're both in this and really committed to it. So that you'll, because I guess if you muck up a job where you're working on your own, you kind of let yourself down. But if you muck it up as a job share, you've let yourself down and your job share partner.
Will, in terms of how it's developed over the 4 years, are there things that you do differently now, you and Sam, that maybe at the start you didn't realise how important it was?
Yeah, very much. So about a year in, we binned our shared email account. Say, it was, the IT didn't quite work across, phones and things. Like it was more hassle than it was worth. And we'd both been at Aviva by that point about 7 years each. So we were reasonably well known, within the company. So, and we have an excellent PA, Siobhan, who's brilliant at kind of, you can look at inboxes if someone's off for half a day or something. Anyway, so we haven't changed the principles, but we've juggled some of exactly how we do it. I think the other thing we've learned over the 4 years is that we are on one level just job sharing within the working week, and that's the rhythm of it. But actually in that time, I had 6 or 7 months off on mental health, having had a breakdown. Sam had 6 months off for parental leave for his second child. Sam did a secondment for 4 months out of Aviva. So like on all those 3 occasions, with a bit of engineering and some childcare, apart from my breakdown, most of it was known in advance and you could plan for it. So the other one merely went up to full time for a bit, so some or all of that time. So there is a flexibility within the job share that is over the years rather than just, over. And it took all the stress out of backfilling or, people stepping up, because obviously you've got someone already doing the job. So I think we've come to see it as much more as a longer term kind of flow rather than a sort of short term week by week thing.
And one of the things you must have learned in that time is, well, I don't know, maybe you knew it already, but your role as role models, if you like. When you first decided to do job share, did you feel like pioneers? Did you feel a certain amount of pressure because you were different? Because, as you say, there's plenty. There are some female job shares out there, but there's very few men. So clearly you were going to stand out. Did you feel that when you started it? And do you perhaps feel it more now?
I haven't ever felt that different. I have felt very fortunate. So so I've spent 2 days a week, because my wife and I share childcare as well. So 2 days a week I have the kids, and 2 days a week she has the kids, and then we need some childcare on the Wednesday where we both work. So I feel very lucky to have spent all that time as a kind of primary carer with my kids in that time. I also feel very lucky because we've managed to set up our lives that we can live on, a smaller salary, and I think we shouldn't walk past that. Obviously you're working less than full time and you get paid less than full time, and so I do feel very fortunate that we've managed to make that work for us. But I don't think I've felt. I mean, I've been really keen to go out and evangelize, if you like, about the possibilities here and the mindset and so on. But the reaction you do normally get is, oh, wow, that sounds cool. But then a kind of automatic discounting that someone could do that. So that's a nice response to get from people. You go around, and you meet, other dads at the school gate, and you say you work 3 days a week, and they're like, okay, well done you, that's good. And I'm like, yeah, do you know what? Well done me. I'm pretty happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, I don't know, maybe you're not, right? Maybe you're just being modest. But you must be aware, because I don't know if Ian will agree here, but as we said at the beginning, I've never actually spoken to you, but I've spoken about you a lot. Because if you're talking about dads and you're talking about working dads, the number of times people will say, oh yeah, those guys at Aviva. And Aviva's name comes up time and again. And sometimes it comes up as, oh, Aviva, yeah, them again. And I always said, look, if you want the publicity, you do it.
Yeah.
Aviva getting all the good publicity for being great for dads and then do nothing about it. It's not hard. You just offer dads what Aviva offer, which is, obviously there's you guys, and then there's the very generous parental leave it is, of course, but it's open to both parents.
Yeah.
You must be aware, aren't you, that you're like, you guys are like heroes of the working dad world. You must know that.
That's genuinely, I don't. That's really nice to hear, obviously. But I don't. I mean, it's not like I have a lot of Twitter followers. I don't know how you measure that kind of that kind of success. And I know. I mean, it's funny because this is like slightly secondary for me in that, my main role in work is I run the sustainability we run the sustainability and public policy teams, in a large, whatever it is, FTSE 20 company. And so in a way, a lot of my identity is about sustainability, and, that's where I show up. But the job, the round tables I go to are with sustainability directors talking about how the hell we're going to measure climate impacts of sovereign bonds or whatever it is. Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah. But generally I haven't. I'm not. I don't think I'm not being modest, but it's I mean, I would love to think that us having done it has persuaded some other people to think about how they run their lives and the possibility of working non-standard hours. But sadly, I think I was talking about it with Ian a bit earlier. There isn't that much evidence of there is no rush of job shares. I mean, possibly in the public sector, where a lot of senior jobs in lots of government departments are done very capably and brilliantly by job sharing civil servants.
Yeah, they tend to feature a lot on TimeWise, don't they? TimeWise Power 50s every year or so. And James is sort of alluding to the Aviva context, and Aviva have always been sort of seen as one of the trailblazers for equalising parental leave and parental pay and full pay. Was there any sense of you guys starting the job share fitting almost fitting alongside sort of broader sort of corporate goals around encouraging more men to take extended leave, sort of when they become new dads? Was there any sense of it sort of merging together in any way, Will?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. So I was only partially involved with the development of that policy. I mean, it was led by the people function, the HR function, and I think Aviva has quite a strong sense of its place in the community. So it sounds a bit cheesy to people listening, but I haven't worked in any other large corporates, I must admit. So I mean, I think in my role at the Fatherhood Institute, I'm actually not technically the chair anymore, but I was the chair for 5 years, perhaps, maybe even longer. And now I'm still a trustee. But I've been, using my position at Aviva to try and talk to dads in the workplace at Aviva, and talk about the Fatherhood Institute and the work that they do and what that means for us. And so I feel like I've been trying to play my part in like opening up the conversation. And I think I was, even when I went to 4 days a week, I think I was probably one of very few people that senior who was working, non-standard hours. So in a way, I've been pushing kind of all the way along, but I don't have a formal role in the development of kind of these policies. And actually, Aviva doesn't, we don't have a job share policy. We have a flexible working policy. And maybe it's time for a job share policy. Maybe that would be the thing that gave people more confidence, by really labeling it and putting it on a piece of paper. Maybe that's what's needed now.
Yeah, bits of paper are good, but role models are better. I think that's the key. I'm not saying I'm not trying to tell Aviva how to do their job. Let's face it. I don't bother writing it down. But my experience of working culture is very much that there are a few companies out there who have lovely policies written down and on their website saying this is what we offer dads and all the rest of it. But if no dads actually do it, and the dads that do it have to keep it quiet and aren't celebrated, then it's a fat lot of use for it. Yeah. I think that's where Aviva comes in. I mean, I've just noted down what you said about opening up the conversation, because that feels like the key to this to some extent, is that, and I read your blog about your breakdown as well. Again, that's on the Aviva website, opening up the conversation, so people feel okay to talk about stuff. Similarly with the dads, I know because we used to cover Aviva on working dads. You're big on sharing experiences, getting people to talk about going on parental leave and how they loved it, and then other people want to do it.
I haven't got the numbers right here, but the take up of men and women who've done not just some parental leave, and obviously, but they've done a lot. They've done the full 6 months, and where traditionally you might have heard the arguments of people saying, "Oh, I don't want to be away from my job that long, and I feel like I'd be at risk of redundancy if I came back, or I'd miss out on this big deal," or that turns out if you remove the two obstacles, which is money and stigma, which Aviva, by going out, by paying people properly, and by removing the stigma by talking about it a lot, turns out dads absolutely cannot wait to spend more time with their children. Like, we've completely nailed one of the myths out there that men would sort of rather be at work. And maybe that is true for some men, just as it's true for some women, but it's really not true. It's not the experience that policy has engendered.
Yeah, I mean, it's, can't say it enough. It is actually really important what Aviva have done. Aviva are at the end of the day, whatever they are, a big corporate, and they're interested in making lots of money. That's the bottom line, right? But it is for somehow they have become this brilliant thing, because for people like us, it makes it so much easier to be able to go out and make the case. If you can say, look, Aviva offered 6 months and dads took it. And these are not, Aviva are not employing some sort of cohort of weirdos. These are just normal people who, as you say, if you give them the money and they take away the stigma, like all normal, regular dads, they want to take the time. And similarly with yourself, when you are faced with that question of, I want to do a job share, or that wouldn't work in this role, you're able to go, well, look at these guys, and that is hugely powerful, and really important for the gender, I think.
Yeah, well, I think the next bit, and doesn't always work as a kind of tool for conversion, but I think it's still really important, is this is probably more with my Fatherhood Institute hat on, is that the evidence about having more involved dads and the benefits are like enormous. They are off the scale in terms of the couple are less likely to divorce, their children are more likely to be happier at the age of 16. The dads are less likely to have health problems related to alcohol. The wife is likely to earn more. Did this massive countrywide study, I think it was Sweden, and something like every month that a dad took off in parental leave in the early years, the wife went on to earn 7% more for the rest of the lifetime. So you're doing what seems like little things family by family, but really, if you want to get rid of the gender pay gap, if you want people to divorce less, if you want children to be happier and have better, more stable relationships with their parents, we need dads involved, and dads want to do it. So, these aren't always the arguments that will win you over to a head of HR, but they're equally, not worth losing sight of.
Yeah, definitely. You get those performance benefits when there's
There's a bit there. We've covered all in that bit, just there, that bit.
Oh, I wonder why you were sticking. Maybe. Oh yeah, I can see the spine of the excellent Dads Don't Babysit book.
Yes.
You don't mention it enough. You don't mention it enough, James.
No, I really ought to. It's all in there. All in there. All the cases made there.
It is, but it's that perfect time where you support dads who are facing the stress and the tension, and you support them to be the kind of father that they want to be, and that leads to longer term benefits. And I think it's always worth reminding people that if you've got a new dad who's stressed and under pressure and exhausted and has relationship tension, then they're not going to be performing at their best either. So it can be a shorthand for improving performance, as well as the benefits that we know for kids and individuals and families. So I think it's a really important sort of threshold.
And it takes you back to the pandemic. What else could you change? And things like long commutes. Weirdly, house prices have an effect on father-child relations, because people can't afford to live near their work, so they commute a long time, and that's 2.5 hours a day or whatever it is that they can't do. And so what's happened in the pandemic is dads have come home. If you go back long enough, all work used to be around the home. Mums and dads worked mostly in the home or very nearby, and they brought up the kids. Their kids didn't go to school. And then in the Industrial Revolution, work became something you did elsewhere, and we've been on a track ever since of basically pulling men and increasingly women out of the family home into a work week that was designed for men ages ago, decades ago, and it was designed not for us men now. It's not relevant, and it's no more in the same way it's not relevant for women either. So this is kind of why I try and use the phrase like people who work non-standard hours, because I'm trying to make the point that standard hours is boring and dull and inconvenient, and most people aren't doing it actually. I've run these sessions in Aviva for got like 30 or so dads in a room just to talk to them about what they're doing, and what you find quite a lot is almost no one is working standard hours. But it's all down to the line manager. So if I go and take my kids to school, and then I go for a run, and I only start work on Wednesday at 11, I make the hours up, and my line manager trusts me. It's not on the system. If you ask our HR data, it won't tell you half this stuff. So if you're a policymaker listening to this and you're like, oh, what could I do to legislate? The answer is actually catch up. Like, most people are juggling family life already. I think policymakers and large companies really need to catch up with where people already are or would love to be but can't.
especially in the last 18 months.
Yeah,
but I think I think it's on dads as well actually to do something about that, because one of the things I've come up against and I find is, well, as you'll know, women when they come back from maternity leave will have a flexible working arrangement, whereas men, as you say, will go to their line manager and say, "Is it all right if I do this?" And they won't fill in the form because flexible working's for women, right? That's not for men. So they do it on an informal basis, and as you say, that's not getting picked up in the numbers because it's all informal. And then, as you say, the policymakers, well, how are they supposed to know it's there? And I do feel that there is a slight responsibility on men to, particularly if they're coming back from paternity leave, fill in the form, make it official, because they don't get picked up in the numbers. Then you're protected if your line manager changes and you have a line manager who suddenly wants you in at 9 o'clock in the morning rather than 11. And it just makes it all. I know there are benefits to doing it informally, but I don't know. I at the moment, and I'm willing to be persuaded otherwise, I think we need to go more down the formal route, particularly for dads.
I think if you're in HR or you're a line manager, you should be really aware. The other thing that came out of these sessions I did with lots of dads is people will stick with line managers who offer them flexibility, and they will move away from people. So this was, when I started doing it was a few years ago, and the debate was really about working from home, and now it's moved on to more non-standard working and flexible working and so on. But it was still the same idea: is managers who trust their staff and let them work, let them do the work, but in a way that works for them and their family. You get that trust back in spades, and out of loyalty. And managers who don't do that, people don't want to work for them. So I think if you're a line manager listening, your job is to go into the office tomorrow or onto your Teams call tomorrow, or and ask, right, where's our next job share coming from? Which one of you is going to be the job share? Because whoever comes forward to me, I'll say yes. And I think line managers have a real responsibility to say, because people want to do. We know people want to do this. No one's going to job share if they don't want to. So there's almost zero risk of a bad outcome. You're not going to force someone to do it, but we know that people want more flexibility. They want more time at home with their children, or caring for, their parents or whatever it is. So I think line managers have a big role here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I heard a few years ago somebody said people don't leave companies or organizations, they leave line managers. And that's kind of been my experience. I think I'd never heard that before. Listen, it's pretty obvious that we could talk to Will all day about this stuff. But unfortunately, all being working dads, we've got kids to go and collect because, we're role modeling. That's how it's supposed to be. We better round up really and finish off with some tips. Tips for men, dads, whatever. Where should we go for? Ian looks very keen. Go on then, Ian. What's your tip? He looks keen. That could be a good thing or a bad thing.
No. It's a slightly absurd one. Having obviously this is the 45th tip, so we do run out of them sometimes. Okay, so we've been growing carrots and spring onions at home, and if you grow carrots and spring onions together, then the spring onions keep away the carrot fly, which is great. But you can't have the soil too rich, so we put regular soil in, and our carrots grew normally. But we were talking to someone at the weekend, and her carrots had grown into like solid blocks because they don't go down into the soil because they don't need to look for the nutrients. So if you want good carrots, don't make your soil too rich. But it's all about how 2021 is that? Growing your own veg.
How is that a tip for dad? That's got nothing to do with men or dads or lockdown.
Carrots.
Oh, isn't it? I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad tip, but we've got to episode 45, and that is the most.
Okay, all right. I'll take that. It's a little bit surreal, but growing carrots, but we talked about before, being outside, bit of gardening, good for the soul, and if you plant them right, you get good quality carrots, organic, homegrown.
There's the bar, Will. That's the bar for tips you've got to get over. Have you got a tip?
I need tips like that. I've just pulled out a row of fennel and a row of radishes that completely failed. I grew 6 feet tall, but nothing edible at the bottom. So gardening tips, very welcome. I think my tip would be around imagination. I think if you're listening and you pose yourself the question, how could I do my job in a different way? you'll find that really hard to answer, because you're doing it how you're doing it and trying to imagine how you do it in a different way. We find that hard as people. But I think if you start at the other end of the telescope and you just start with a blank sheet of paper, on a Sunday evening or somewhere where you're a bit away from work context, and you just say, what would I love? And it's not that you're going to get that, but just what would be, and start with some imagination and then work forward from there. But I think that what we've been discussing, and I think there's problems with line managers, there's problems with individuals and so on. But some of this is just having the imagination to be able to see that we can do things in a different way, and we'll get the same, if not better results.
I think that's a really good tip. As somebody who's recently started working part-time, this stuff isn't necessarily easy, as you'll have found doing the job share. It's not straightforward, but if you have in your head why you're doing it and what you want, I think that is very strong. And that kind of speaks to my tip as well, I suppose, which is much more mundane, but I suppose related. Have a notepad next to your bed. That's my tip for dads, because you may have your best ideas both, when you're either first thing in the morning or trying to get to sleep, or when you come out of the shower or whatever. It's handy to have a notepad nearby, but it's also useful for writing down feelings and whatever might come to you at an unexpected moment. Whether that's for writing down your dream work setup might suddenly strike you at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, but have a notepad next to the bed, and it's just useful for work and being a dad. I think it's a very mundane tip, but I don't think we've had that one. I think I've said that one over the last 45. quite a good one. Right. We've got kids to go and get. Ian, do you want to wind up?
Yeah. Will, thank you very much for being here. We'll put the link to the Fatherhood Institute into the comments, into the chat. And also that article about the McKinsey research, which is the 7% increase. So when each month that dads take extended parental leave, their mums' salaries go up by 7%, which is really, really striking. I think it's really, really important. But Will, thank you very much for joining us. It has been episode number 45 of Lockdown Dads, which means we have one left. James and I will be wrapping up in a couple of weeks' time, reflecting back over this season and all the seasons as officially on the 19th of July, everything will open up. So that's a bit of excitement for all of us. Will, thank you very much for joining us. James, it's been a pleasure as always. Do give a like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this content. Thank you very much, everyone.